Hello, my loves. I want to talk today on a topic that is super important in our journey of embodiment into the feminine, but on a really practical level. And that is understanding the principles of devotion and surrender and how that actually plays out in our lives. And I want to get honest and I want to get real, like I always do, about what's been happening in my life and how my expansive belief system that once grew me so big became my greatest limiting beliefs. And the reason I want to share and drop into these topics with you today is because wherever you are in your life, I think so often in our spiritual journeys, we aren't really told that your expansive belief system that you started with when you began your healing journey or your awakening journey that was like mind blowing, I'm so open, can actually become your greatest limit, your limitation, your limiting belief. And we form what we call the spiritual ego, where our ego, our old self dies, like that old part of us that was not serving us, it dies. But then we form a new identity. And that new identity has belief systems and we attach to it. And it serves such an important purpose. But then there comes a point in life, and you might be noticing this or have noticed this, where those really like expansive, high consciousness beliefs are not serving you anymore. They're limiting you. And so what happens is we go through another death, but this time it's like all of the old shadows of fear come up, but it's around things that are supposedly good. And there becomes this massive conflict inside our minds and our hearts and our bodies where we're like, what the fuck am I supposed to do now? I thought I had gone through the deaths. I thought I'd gone through all of it. Like, what is happening now? These were my expansion points. These were the things that made me so safe, so good. And I want to bring it into my own life. And again, every time I talk about my life and my journey, it's a prayer that it's a mirror for you, wherever you are in your life, to hear it and take it on board and to open up space inside your soul and your mind to see actually how God works. And we're going to bring it down to the principle of devotion and surrender, two of the most powerful feminine energies that we can ever have is the energy of devotion, to dissolve fully, to devote fully, and to surrender, to let go, to bow down, even though we don't have to, even though we could put up a fight, even though we have reasons not to actually be able to surrender. That is the feminine by nature. It is the chaos that comes into the order. It is the one that receives what is being provided for. But so many of us live in resistance and control. And that's what's blocking us from receiving God, life, provision, expansion, is we get a sense of expansion, but then we want to control it. We don't want to surrender. We don't want to fully devote. It doesn't feel safe in our bodies to do that. Especially when we have a belief system that what has been really expansive for us should stay the same. But this is exactly where God grows the soul. Before I go into my own life, one more principle for you just to hold on to is understanding that we as human beings are made from the stars. We're made of stardust. If you talk to any biologists or people who study the cosmos or anyone who understands physics, they're going to tell you that we're made from elements, and those elements were originally created inside stars. We are cosmic beings in an embodied experience on a planet. We are supercomputers moving through space and time continuum, reflecting fractals of light and integrating it into consciousness that mirrors through thought, emotion, and feeling. And by the very nature of that, the nature of the universe is that there has to be a contraction point for expansion to happen. For any expansion, for any momentum, there has to be a point where it's so contracted that it then spans out. How the whole universe began. Such a deep contraction point that a single atom imploded into itself and the heat signature poured out. I think it was for 365,000 years until finally it was cool enough to separate into hydrogen And so life created. We have to have an expansion, a contraction for an expansion. So, based on those principles, let me drop into a little bit of my journey and what's been happening in my life. And I really pray that wherever you're at in your journey, that it resonates with you and that you can really see how God works for us. So, when I started my healing journey, and I really started to want to be this feminine woman who believed in life, let's backtrack this to 2020. So, that's 4 years ago, maybe 4.5 years ago. We're almost at the end of 2024. Crazy. I was a wreck. I remember my dad played me this podcast of this man who said what you should look for in your future partner. Someone who had these aligned visions, who had like a really controlled temper, who was sober, who was devoted, who had a spiritual practice, who was clean of living, who all these things. And I remember sitting and just like being like, I am the last person in the world anyone should want to marry. Of course, my feminine heart, every little girl, I want to get married. I want to have a family. I want to spend my life with someone. I want to feel claimed. I want to feel chosen. But I recognized, bro, you are the last woman on the planet any guy with half a freaking brain would want to marry. I had terrible emotional outbursts. I had no control over my mouth. I was in fight or flight constantly. I was absolutely achievement focused in trying to make money or make something happen in my career. I was pushing, 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 anything to get myself safety. I drank heavily. I would binge out. I had done drugs. I was trying to get sober. I was all over the show. When I saw men, what I saw was something that would rescue me, something that should save me. And I had this needy, aggressive, strange energy. I was completely blocked in my sexuality. I didn't know how to feel or express or listen to my body's intuition. I was doing everything based on conditioning of how a girl should be, how you should show up in a relationship, what should happen. And ultimately, I was just really blocked and broken. And I felt crippled because I was young and I was beautiful and everything on the outside looked right. But on the inside, there was such a massive disconnect from every aspect, from my womb to my heart to my drive and my passion to the way I expressed to the way I could even see the world. I was a fear-based being that was desperate to try and figure out a way to actually be in that feminine, faith-based knowing and existence and flow. And the thing that really triggered me into my big healing was that I got a dream. I needed a new belief system because at that time, my belief system was I will always be betrayed. Men are terrible. I need to be the best. I had all these limiting beliefs. And I shifted my belief system. And my belief system that got me to begin my healing was become a beautiful wife, a woman with whom someone, a high value man, would want to marry. And I remember sitting back and thinking, I need to get clear on the guy I want to marry. It's a big thing that I teach inside my program, SEM, is getting really freaking clear on who you want to marry. And I really sat down and I got clear on it. And the more clear I got about the guy that I wanted to marry, the more my life started to evolve. I wanted a guy who was sober. I wanted a guy who had a good family. I wanted a guy who had good investments. I wanted a guy who was really sexually pure. I had like quite a detailed list of what I wanted, which I think many men today would say is unattainable, but I promise you it is attainable. And there are men like that. But I knew I needed to be that woman to attract that man, because if you want a sexually pure, wealthy, kind, driven, masculine man, you as a woman need to be pure. You need to be open and functioning in rooms and spaces where you're around those kind of men. You need to be that level of frequency. You need to be open. You need to be in your feminine to attract the masculine. So I started my freaking journey. And let me tell you, it was a journey. From 2020 to 2023, I would say those were my 3 biggest years. I went all in on it. I created, of course, now what I teach, the sensual embodiment method. I created a method that rewired my RAS, my reticular activating system, my subconscious brain, that biologically shifted my body. I went through purification, healing, mind, body, sex, magic, tantra, purity, celibacy. I went in. I birthed a company. I started earning money. I started putting things into investments. Every step of my journey, I created myself into the woman that a high value man would want to marry. I used to have a joke with my one employer. Her name was Mary, my Mary Bear. And every time I used to live with her, and every time I did something, she's like, wow, that's amazing. I was like, add it to the wife resume. And we literally had a joke wife resume. It was such a big part of me. And it inspired me every day to stay sober, to get off my medication, to heal my womb. I had PCOS, endometritis, and both my ovaries had imploded. I went so deep into my healing energetically, no medication, that I changed the shape of my freaking organs. All the cysts disappeared, endometritis disappeared, my bleed came back, and my ovaries grew back to a normal shape. Doctors are still fascinated by how my body transformed. I was deep into my practices because I wanted to be a wife and a mom. I wanted to be that woman that a man would be like, I want to wife her. And so I built and I built and I built, and I eventually ended up moving to Bali and living in Bali and creating this dream life, dream home, dream career. Everything was growing. And then in the midst of it, I knew it was the time that my man was meant to come into my life. And of course, because we'll get into that in another talk, existential kinks, but my existential kink is I need a massive destruction. This is just me. This is how I've always worked. There has to be some massive catastrophe for me to actually really wake up and shift my paradigm. And that happened over a year ago. I got deported in Bali. And the night I was being deported, and I'll go into a detail of all of this, my best friend at the time, Daniel, flew in and he called me and he said, Em, I don't know why I'm flew into Bali, but I feel it's you. Like I can't help it. Like there's something, I feel like there's some energy thing here. And I was like, I'm being deported tomorrow morning. Like, how did you know? And he's like, I didn't. Anyways, we met the next morning and we realized that it was more than just a friendship, that there was real love there. And suddenly my whole expansion point of being this celibate, single, powerful, beautiful woman just imploded. And I manifested the love of my life. But it came at the cost or the crushing of everything that I knew. And I spent the last year of my life trying to repiece together my identity because my ego, my spiritual ego, my awakened ego got so obliterated. I literally told people, literally everything about my root chakra got fucked. Freudian, but true. Every part. It was like sex for the first time in 5 years after being celibate for 5 years, my home gone, international travel. We traveled to 9 countries in the first no, we traveled to 14 countries in the first 9 months. It was like everything that had been grounding and rooted, that was my sense of self, was just. But there was this belief system inside me that held me. And that belief system was, I'm a wife. And what I noticed I did over the first year in Daniel and I's relationship was I just took on that role. I was like, I'm a wife, I'm a wife, I'm a wife. And as time passed, what started to build up inside me was this deep resentment because it's like I'm not actually his wife. Like I'm telling myself I am, I'm acting like I am, but I'm his girlfriend. And what happened inside me in the last couple months has been this crazy contraction point. Because what had once expanded me into actually getting my shit together and my life together and creating me everything I wanted, which was becoming the perfect wife and being the wife material, was now starting to crush and erode my reality. Because that belief system was so strong inside me, I started to not be able to see through the lens of love towards my partner, our home, our life that we had, which was perfect. Daniel and I have the most incredible relationship. We have a vision set for where we want to go. We have thriving businesses. We have deep love. We have love making that goes beyond the planet. We travel, we have the dream. Not to mention that we meet each other at every layer, at every detail, and we love each other there. I have never been more seen by a person. And it's so fucking intimidating to have someone who really sees you and stays. But what I started to notice was this belief system was just starting to blind me. And I couldn't see through the lens of love. All I could see was the lens of my conditioning, which was I have done all this work to be a wife and I don't feel I'm being met or valued. And so I started to, in a perfect reality, I started to crush it. And this is the thing about the human ego, is the human ego will always latch onto something to create an identity. And either that ego needs to die or it will destroy your life, even if it's a good one. And why do you think that keeps happening to so many people? They're like, they have everything, but they walk away, they freak out, they quit, there's an identity that's blocking them from actually receiving reality, and a reality that has the potential to grow only if we allow it. And so what I saw in my life in the last couple of months was this belief system that had once been my expansion point was becoming my contraction point. And it was crushing my heart. It was crushing my love. It was crushing my partner. It was crushing our intuition. It was crushing our ability to sense spiritually. It was crushing our close relationships because it was becoming so all consuming that it wasn't actually letting us be in the present moment. It was taking us anywhere but the present moment. Let me get into those core principles now. The feminine is required in its nature of energy to devote and to surrender. Devotion is the dissolving. When I first started my healing journey, when I had been super in my masculine, I had to devote to God, to life, to a vision, to a dream. I had to dissolve my old self. And that to life and to God and to self is so powerful. I melted. I melted away my years of shame. I melted away my embodied pain. I started to feel my sensuality. I started to reshift my paradigm. I was devoted. I was on a path of devotion. I moved countries because I felt a calling. I invested because it felt right in my system. I was not my own. I was a co-creator. I felt God's guidance. And so I expanded. But the next expansion point after devotion is surrender. And surrender is so fucking intense because surrender is saying, I let go of everything I devoted and melted to, and I allow something new to happen. And if you've really devoted to something and trusted with faithfulness, but also semi-blind, when you're just following the calling of God, it's like you are following your intuition because you cannot know all things. To then just let it go and be like, oh yeah, I should just let all that go and trust something new. It sounds beautiful in principle, but inside, that inner man, that inner ego part, that inner strength, that inner, like, it puts up a fight. But it's the next depth, it's the next expansion point is surrender. Surrender what you think is best. Surrender your belief system. Surrender all that you know. Surrender what you think is right, even if it's been expansive. Because surrender is being present enough to realize that what once was expansive is now contracting you, is crushing you. And in God's eyes, there isn't a right or a wrong. There is simply a place of opening or a place that is blocked. And if you're choosing to focus on what's blocked because it once felt open, you're not in a place of surrender. You're in a place of control and fear. You're in the mind. And that's exactly where I've been and exactly where I've got to and where we all get to. We need to know the contraction point. But it's recognizing that in the contraction point, you're not a victim. You don't have to lose everything that you care about. It's God's way of saying, are you ready to go deeper into the next level? And that for me is the surrender point. Surrender is your capacity to let go of what you think is right. It is your capacity to say, I'm willing to put that belief system to a side because it's currently not giving me space in my life. And it's not to say that what you believe in won't happen, but you've got to step the fuck out of the way so that God can actually create something for you and through you. Because you in your own power are limiting your human experience because by nature we are limited. And I saw that in my life when it really came to this climactic peak in my relationship with Daniel, where I really felt like I was just going to throw it all away. I went through such a time of pain and turmoil because everything presented perfect, but inside I felt so crippled and I couldn't let it go. I just couldn't. I fought so fucking hard. I called my dad. I was screaming my childhood beliefs, how my parents raised me. I was blaming. I was resenting Daniel. All these things. I couldn't take responsibility for the fact that I needed to let go of my belief system, to let God do something that I actually wanted. This is the humbling moment in our feminine embodied journey on a spiritual level. Is that you don't know best. You have to let yourself devote and know something new, but you have to give yourself the space to surrender that exact same fucking thing. And I think that's the part that so many spiritual teachers miss, is that what once was really expansive can and will become very contracting for the point that God wants to see where your heart is at. Are you at a place where you devote and are able to surrender what you once devoted to? Are you at the edge of faith? And I always say faith is on the razor edge of fear. It's both because you're in the unknown. Faith is a substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not yet seen. You can't see it. It's just, you don't know. But isn't that fear too? And the edge of the unknown with no fucking clue what's waiting on the other side. And the direction and the trajectory of where you go as a person is solely based on your belief system. And God will always want to see where you're at. Are you going to fall into fear, into control, into limiting, into walking away, into trying to make it the way you want it? Or are you going to surrender and just let Him take over? Are you going to let yourself fall into that space and that flow just to see what happens? Detach from the outcome because you don't know. The fact that you're trying to have faith and surrender because you think it's going to get you the outcome you want, you're not in surrender. It's letting go and falling into the flow of what God has for you and what life has for you. And so for me, in my life, in my human experience, as we slowly start to close this portal, that's the edge that I've been walking on recently. And it's a big edge. And let me tell you, if you're in your life, God's going to call you out on the place that you value the most. I based my whole business, all my marketing, all my everything, all of my work that I do, all of the stuff I do with my girls on calling in your king, being fully claimed. I created a huge identity around it. And that was based on my identity of healing. It expanded me so much, so much. I transformed. I devoted into that transformation. And now I transform hundreds of women's lives. But at the heart of me, God wants to see what's pure. Are you going to throw everything away because it doesn't go the way you think it should? When you think it should, how you think it should? Or are you willing to surrender? Are you willing to just let go and detach and come back into a place of love, come back into a place of presence? I can tell you for me, it's been one of the most intense experiences I've been on, and I'm still in it. But what I can say is that the second I chose surrender over control, and it's recent, everything changed in my life. My body softened, my relationships reopened, my friendships became better, my love became so much deeper, my acceptance became greater than I've ever experienced. And I survived. I came through. I became more open. And I think that's probably the most beautiful thing about surrender is what it does for you. And for us to always remember that whatever we go through in life is for us. It's not happening to you, it's for you. And ultimately, it's to move through you for others so that they get to experience unconditional love, the power of surrender, the power of devotion. So, wherever you are in your life right now, I want you to look at the places that feel super sticky, the places that maybe once expanded you that are now feeling super contracting, the relationship, the job, the whatever it is, the belief system that built your current identity. And I want to encourage you to lean into a place of surrender, to see what happens when you just think it's okay to allow it to be let go. And if this is impacting you and you are at that place and you don't know how the fuck to do it and it's so turmoily, please reach out. There will be a link below to connect in with me either on Instagram or Calendly. It's exactly what I'm here to do and teach, and I walk that road myself all the time. We all do. We're all walking each other home. But I can tell you there are practices, there are depths that we can go to as women and men for that matter that make that transition physically, emotionally, spiritually so much easier. And I would love to support you. I'd love to be there for you. But as for today, take a breather, have a look at the life that you're in. We're all in that phase. We're in spiritual autumn where we're being required to either devote or surrender. It will be one of the two. To dissolve your sense of self and let the old self die, or to let go of the belief system that you once thought was going to be your biggest expansion point, and to recognize that there's a new expansion ahead and it's right at the edge of you letting it go, what you thought was right. So feel into it. We're here, we're together, and I'm sending you all so much love.